In a previous video I made, I talked about whether to specialize or generalize, and I kind of talked about how there's a lot of overlap between some skills you may delve into specializing that really turn out to be generalizing, and I kind of wanted to touch upon some other things that I may not have mentioned that kind of like fall into both realms. So you had specialize. Oops. Sorry, I'm drawing with the wrong tool. You had the specialize, and you had generalize, and we had like a bunch of stuff, but today I'm more concerned with the overlap of both. I think drawing like that. Let me do that again. I think I had the title right there. Okay, so we had the specialize and the generalize. So other things that kind of fall into both, I'm not sure if I mentioned proportions. I mentioned proportions, but the other thing that, well, no, I'm sorry. I mentioned perspective, but there's kind of like a difference between understanding it separately from perspective. Like, it's kind of weird because like a lot of drawing concepts you kind of have to like you really can't accomplish one without the other. You kind of like have to have both of them simultaneously to really pull it off, and it can be really frustrating starting out when you're trying to find that balance. And it's kind of like I don't even think that falls within the terms of like I think that's more of like a generalization type thing. But I think in certain instances it kind of would fall within this specialization type category, depending on like what you want to work with. Now the other thing, I think I mentioned it, shape language. And that gets brought up a lot, but I don't think it would really apply to something like realism. Because like when I think of realism, like you can specialize in realism, but like everyone should always be trying to draw reality. But like the problem is like with shape language, it could be helpful to think of things in terms of like silhouettes. I don't know if I spelled silhouette right. There may be an O in there or something like that. But like shape language, it can be helpful to think about like silhouettes, negative space. Because I think initially getting big picture shapes for things is a really good way to summarize them, to even try to understand realism. It's kind of like you start with the simpler atoms of something before you try to achieve realism. And I think it's a good learning tool to try to get to that point. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a master in this myself yet, but it's like one of those, it's like another concept that I feel like everyone kind of needs to understand to be able to see the big picture shape. Whether it be an actual shape or like some unique shape itself. Like people may try to like summarize the head as like a ball, but anyone who has ever looked at a head realizes that it's not a ball. You know, like you could try to summarize it that way, but there are all of these nuances to the curvature of it, the way the facial structure is, the way the jaw connects to the skull. You'll quickly realize that a lot of things are unique. Now the other thing I wanted to mention, I feel like beauty, I'm not saying everything has to be beautiful, so I guess beauty is actually probably not a good term. I would say emotion. The emotion of a work. I think depending on the colors and the context, it is important because whether you do it intentionally or unintentionally, I feel like certain emotions are going to be evoked from the viewer. So it is important to kind of have an understanding of emotions, because I think that it will affect everything you do. And even if you don't know it now, it is going to be affecting everything you do. So, like, be aware of that. What, like, think of, like, if everything you make has, like, a dark feeling to it, well, it may fall into that. I'm not trying to pigeonhole everything you do into some emotion, but just be aware of it and be cautious of it, because I think it could really help you in some way. Perhaps you could even use it to your advantage to try to make the whole thing emotional in that sense. The other thing, artistic choices. So those are always the things that I feel like should be avoided until you can do realism. I tend to think of it much like a gate, because there are various things to be, very cautious of. Like, you want to have strong drawing ability before you start making artistic choices, because the second you do that and people see through your skill, or you could just say, oh, this is my artistic choice. Well, you probably lack a lot of strong foundational knowledge, which, I mean, personally, I'm talking from experience, because I still lack a lot of important concepts that I'm trying to work towards every day to get to. But it is important to be aware of that some of these things, like, you want to do this, like, far down the line. Like, don't let your lack of skill, and like I said, I lack skill, so I don't mean to be insulting people, but don't let your lack of skill, don't let you, okay, let me say that again. Don't say that it's an artistic choice when you lack skill. Just make sure you have that skill before you do that artistic choice. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is drawing skill. When I think of scale, I think of 1-to-1, smaller, or larger. Now, I know there's probably exceptions to this, in which you could always do it in different ways, but I tend to think of everything within these three terms. What you should target, it's hard for me to say. I would say try to work with the scale of the thing that you're drawing right now. If you're working digitally, it may be a bit easier to reference an image to try to work from the current size of that image. And it's something that I've had to think about a lot. The reason is because I made an application. Well, I have quite a few applications I made. Not trying to throw that into my video or anything. But a big thing that I always kind of have to think about is how things size proportionally. So I think it's very annoying to use proportional dividers or anything like that. But I think using things like that, it's kind of like a skill in itself. Personally, I don't do that. I think I always try to draw things. If I'm seeing it, I try to draw it 1-to-1. If I don't, it's probably a mistake that I'm making. You could use a proportional divider or like a compass, because I think with a compass you could, like, if it has like 2 points, you could always try to do stuff 1-to-1. For most objects, it could be difficult trying to do that for like life-size type things, like a person. The other thing is you may be limited by your canvas that you're working with. I mean, you could always zoom in, but it makes things difficult. So a thing that I thought of when I was always making my applications, trying to make things size proportionally. Because if you don't do that digitally, it will make things look a bit weird. Like, it will cause weird skew when there shouldn't be. So I pretty much had to enforce scale into the tools that I made to make it look right. So they're not always life-size. More often than not, when you take a photo with a camera, it is not going to be to scale. It's going to be to like some other, or it won't be 1-to-1. It'll be probably smaller to fit it all in. So just be aware of that. Making it larger would be upscaling, making it smaller would be downscaling. Now, another principle is I think just Gestalt, aka the whole of the thing. This delves into like really obscure stuff. It all has to do with like how your composition overall or drawing looks overall and how everything within it interacts. People do things like thumbnailing. They try to thumbnail to try to summarize it into one small thing. And I think it can work, but I think more often than not, certain things tend to appear when you're in your final drawing. But be aware how things may fight, pull. I guess this also kind of falls into the whole point of composition. So it kind of falls into composition or compositional choices or decisions. And I do just want you to be aware of that. I bet some book exists in that sense. The other thing is fine detail. I've seen some paintings that go into incredible realism. Or they may avoid detail entirely and kind of just work with the brush strokes, like of the brushes that they used in their work. I think that's like kind of an artistic choice, whether you want to do generalization or fine detail. So I guess I should have said. Well, I guess that falls into that. But I hope that kind of helps. The other thing is learning symmetry versus asymmetrical or asymmetry. All have varying degrees. That kind of falls into emotion, or it doesn't really. Well, yeah, I think it can cause an emotional effect. Everything is just so interrelated and interconnected. Being aware of it is better than not being aware of it, is what I would say. The other thing is just admitting there's too much to draw. I think I said that, but no, there's too much to draw, but you could always learn. You know, in the event you wake up one day and you want to draw something completely different than what you've been drawing for your entire drawing career. The other thing is working, whether you want to choose like a landscape. You would think I have dyslexia, but I do not. I only make these mistakes when I'm talking, which sometimes I'll be trying to write a letter, and then I tend to write the one that comes after until the one that I write next. I don't know why I'm doing that, but it's only when I'm talking in videos like this do I actually do that. Whether you want to work in like a landscape view, which I'm pretty sure, I don't know this for a fact, but I've always found that like I think of landscapes like that and portraits like that. My theory, which I can't confirm, is that if you see paintings like landscape paintings featuring like, I don't know, maybe some scenery or an event, you'll see it in that view. And a portrait of like a person, you usually see it in this view. I'm just gonna do a mini drawing of someone, something like that. It like features either all of their body or like a torso or something like that. You get where I'm going with that. And like this, I don't know, you'll see like a meandering river or something like that, and trees. You know. I think it is related to that, and I think different drawings will cause different emotional effects based on that. It's like kind of how you present it. I'm not saying everything has to fit within those squares. That kind of falls more into the infinite canvas concept that I have talked about in another video. Don't let anything limit you when it comes to art. Okay, so the other thing I would say is canvas size. When I say canvas size, If you ever have been in a museum, you'll see massive canvases that are they take up an entire wall, and sometimes you may see other works that take up I don't know, maybe 6 inches by 6 inches, incredibly small works. I think all canvas sizes have their merits, and it all depends what you want to do. But that choice matters. In digital, you work in pixels. I mean, they try to fit. Uh, Resolution's a whole another thing. I usually work in 4096 by 2160. They try to translate it into millimeters. I think you could try to get in inches as well, or all these other units. Digital's weird because if you do want to print it, you do have to work within some constraints, or it may not. Like if you're working with pixels, especially, it may not scale down properly. That's why you would want to use vector. But then I get into other arcane details. I talked about composition before somewhere. There are books on this. I will have to recommend a resource for composition. I think composition is important, but that also falls within emotional effects and artistic choice. It kind of falls into both of these things. A lot of it's interrelated, so you kind of have to play around with it. The other thing I would say is learning terminology. Specifically, maybe fine art or whatever thing that you want to get into. It is important that you internalize that terminology, because perhaps you may invent the wheel, or you may be able to pick up on an emotional effect that someone else made, and you may be able to do it in your own way. I'm not saying everything has to be a copy of something, but I am trying to say it is important to have that type of knowledge, and you can learn that through books, a university course, or a local college, or something like that, or I think I mentioned books or the internet. Probably the internet is your best choice if you want to learn this stuff. The other thing, techniques. You could find that all around the web. I would say every medium has their own unique techniques to learn and do, and some you'll learn and never use again. Other ones you may use every day for the rest of your life. Not to sound grim when I say that, but there are techniques for different things. Digital has a whole nother set of things to use. I'm probably not doing too many advanced techniques, but whether it be with working digitally with paint or working physically with paint, drawing, it's really endless, but they exist out there if you know where to search. The other thing that I think is important, and I kind of didn't mention this for fine detail, but I think subtle nuances. Understanding very subtle things, I think, is important for fine detail. You kind of don't pick up on it until you've drawn a heck of a lot, and it's kind of I have to say the realization is after I screw up at it so many times, I then realize it, and then I still lack the ability to do it, but it's I understand where I'm going wrong, but I lack the muscle memory and skill level to actually execute on it. So being aware of that is another important thing. I would also say the other thing is if you hear information twice, let's say you read something, I feel if you hear information twice, or if you've read it in some way, and this is the second way that you're hearing it, I would say you're in a good position in which you're kind of grasping an understanding of everything that you've been trying to do. When I was in university a while ago, when I was in university, I would realize, I want to say my professor said, I was writing some paper, it was for research, and what I learned was that I think I said to him, I feel like I read the same thing 3 times, and they were like, oh yeah, you're doing it right. And I was kind of unsure whether I'm doing it right or whether the diversity of my information was lacking. But no, it's you reach a saturation point I guess that's the better word to call it rather than hearing it twice, because you may hear it more than twice. Or like, I would call it the information saturation point, in which I feel like when you do hear it again, it means you've learned it, but you may not be able to apply it. So do be aware to be able to apply all of these concepts. The other thing is, a lot of these concepts, like, I have not done all of these. This is just what I'm thinking of when it comes to everything. I'm not a pro in any of these things. I'm still in my formative years, is what I would call it. But like I said, I feel like I try to fit everything within a circle, but to be honest, I feel like there is no circle. I feel like there's just the infinite. So I hope that kind of helps expand upon some of the points that I missed in my other video. And perhaps I'll always be able to add something on to this, but I hope it kind of helps you in some way. If you have a question, please leave it in the comments. If you like the video, please like it. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Thanks for listening. Bye.